welcome you to our sixth conversion class. As we continue on in these series, we'll have about 4 more classes, and then we'll change to something else and get ready for the conversions next year. Hopefully before Passover, we'll start getting ready for that. Today we're going to talk about intent. What is your intent? In other words, what is the reason behind what you are doing? Everything that we do has some intent, some purpose to it. And so we're going to be talking about that today. For example, about 60 years ago or so, it became very popular here in the United States for newborn babies to be circumcised who were not Jewish, for medical reasons, for health reasons. And so the intent was for health purposes, for health reasons. So they were not being circumcised in order to be Jewish, they were being circumcised to better their health. So then if a male has already been circumcised, does he need to be circumcised again? And the answer is yes, because of intent. What was the purpose? So a Jewish boy who was circumcised on the 8th day, it is called a Brit Milah. Everyone say Brit, which means a covenant. Milah, which means that's a circumcision. So it's a covenant through circumcision, a covenant through cutting. All right? And so the Brit Milah. If a male was circumcised as a child, so not having a foreskin, they are coming to conversion, they are converting to Judaism, and they've already been circumcised, then how are you re-circumcised? Because you've already been circumcised. And it cannot count because of intent, because of purpose. So then we have what is called a Brit Dam. Everyone say Brit Dam. Dam means blood, because blood must be shed as part of the covenant. And so the male member is pricked with a needle and blood is brought forth, and that is the blood of the covenant. Okay, so it's a Brit Dam. So you have the Brit Milah, which is full circumcision. But if you have already been fully circumcised, not under the intention of converting to Judaism, but for health reasons or other various reasons, if you've already been circumcised, then it cannot count, because that was not your purpose. Okay, so in other words, what God is instituting through this is that you cannot be trading off with him. Okay, he's not playing to the highest bidder. He's not playing games. He's not, let's make a deal. He's not into that kind of a business. Okay, into that kind of a thing, I should say. You're not making a deal with him. You're making a covenant with him. You're making a contract with him. And so he's very precise about what it is that he requires from us. And he tells us that Torah is not too hard for you. It's not too difficult for you. And Rav Shaul goes on to quote that passage of Scripture in the book of Romans. It says that it is near to you, even in your heart. He's talking about Torah, that the Torah is near to you. It's in your heart. And so God says this is not too difficult a thing for you, and you're not to consider it to be a difficulty. And there are various things that people will say, and we hear this quite frequently in Messianic Judaism, in Judaism, and in Christianity, because the human mind desires explanation. Why do I need to do this? What is this for? What is this about? And so there are various things that we would want explained. So for example, why can we not eat pork? Why not? What's wrong with the pig? And so people will come up with various reasons. They carry tapeworms, they carry diseases and all of these kinds of things, and so they're not as healthy. Well, actually, yes and no, because believe it or not, I've raised both sheep and cattle, and both of them carry worms too. Fish carry worms. If you catch a big fish, you don't eat it because it's got worms in it. Okay, cattle and sheep have diseases. They can get diseases. I had some sheep that they got a bacteria inside their lungs, and it went to their brain, and they went insane, and they would walk around staggering like they were drunk. You can't eat that. Okay, there's a chance that you pick up the disease that they're carrying. You've all heard of mad cow disease. That hit Great Britain several years back, and they had to quit selling beef for quite a while. They had to import their beef from the United States and from various countries because their beef was no good. So we can't say that it's about health, that it's about, those kinds of things, that this meat is healthier than that meat or any of that. It's actually not about that. It's simply because God said. And that's all the reason that you and I need. That's all the explanation we need. He's Father. He's Abba. And I am the Son. I'm the child. And so as it is improper for a child to question the parent, so it is improper for us to question God. As it is improper for a child to demand explanation, so it is improper for us to demand explanation. He does not need to explain himself for us. He can do it, and we can say, well, we'll know the reason. Well, maybe you will, maybe you won't. We don't know. We don't know. That's not the point. The point is, he said. And is that sufficient for you? Is that sufficient for me? And so God is particular about how we approach him, in what means we approach him. And one of the things that he is particular about is intent. What is your purpose? For example, when you came here today, what was your purpose? What was the intent of your heart? I know when I was growing up in church, and I'm not bad-mouthing church because it happens in synagogues too. When I was growing up as a teenager, one of the reasons why I enjoyed going to church was because there were some pretty girls there. And I had my one good eye. I had my eye on them. That was pre-Wilma days. I didn't even know she existed at that time. But so we all have ulterior motives as to what we're doing and why we're doing it at times. Not a blanket statement, but there are times. For example, when there's someone whom we love who is not well, is sick, perhaps dying. Many people run to church to pray, or they come to the synagogue service and go through the liturgy, hoping that God will see them and hear them and answer their prayer. Is there anything wrong with that? Yes and no. Because it comes down to intent. You see, in effect, if we're doing this so that God will heal a person, well, it's good that you're praying, but the intent is wrong. You should be coming and going through liturgy for the sake of worshiping God and nothing else. No more, no less. That the reason why I'm here is solely to bring honor and glory to him. Now, a secondary action, and you may have secondary action may be that you desire healing, and so while we're here, we pray refuah, We will pray the healing prayer. But that should not be the intent of your being here. Your intent, your purpose of being here, your primary interest is to bring honor and glory to Hashem. So, you see, the intent of not eating pork should not be that it's healthier for you. You don't need an explanation. I don't eat pork because God said, don't eat pork. I don't eat catfish because God said, don't eat catfish. I don't eat shrimp or lobster because God said, don't eat shrimp or lobster. Okay? And that should be our attitude in all things, in everything that he tells us. Now, there are times where God gives us the explanation. There are times when he gives us the reasoning behind what he's instructing us. And then sometimes he just simply says, do this or don't do this, because I said so. And in fact, in Judaism, it is broken down in these categories. He gives you a mitzvah to do, and he tells you why. He gives you a mitzvah to do, he tells you why, and he gives the philosophical and logical explanation behind it. And then the third one is that he gives you a mitzvah to do, and he doesn't tell you why. He just says, do it. We should take all of the mitzvot as that third one. That technically, it's good that he gives us explanation. It's good that he gives us analogy. But that he said, do it, is enough, is sufficient. God is calling. Hello, shalom. So with the Brit Dam, with the Brit Milah and the Brit Dam, he doesn't give us explanation. We can come up with all kinds of reasonings, but he doesn't say why. Now we can extrapolate that this is the most tender of part of the male body. It is also one of the driving forces of the male anatomy, and it is very powerful. In fact, it is as powerful, if not more powerful, than the hunger drive. The sexual appetite is actually stronger than the hunger appetite in most males. So basically, what we are doing through circumcision is we are cutting the animal instinct. It is an analogy that we are cutting back the animal side of us in order to give room for the spirit to grow. Have you noticed how many of the things that we do as Jewish men is about cutting back the animal in order to give the spirit room to grow? Remember, we are a duality, and we are the only creature who is a duality. We have two nefeshim. We have the two souls, as it were, two spirits. We have the two instincts. We have the nefesh bechama, which is the earthly, the animal instinct within us. These are the drives that are within you. Hunger, thirst, sex, all of those kinds of things that have to do with this life, this world, just like an animal. Okay, sleep, all of that. Those are our animal instincts. But we also have a heavenly instinct, the spiritual side to us. Now the animals, your pet, the dog, the cat, what have you, they only have the animal instinct. They do not have a spiritual inclination. They only have the physical inclination. So they are driven by the physical life, by this world. That's all they have. That's all they know. It's not their fault. That's the way God created them. The malachim, the angelic beings, the spiritual beings, they only have the spiritual aspect. They do not have the physical aspect. So an angel does not need to eat. He doesn't get hungry. He doesn't need sleep. He doesn't get thirsty. He has no need for any of those kinds of things. He is a spiritual being. Okay? So so the human, you're smarter than you look. I was just kidding. The human, well, he shouldn't interrupt me. He should not be interrupting my teachings. Anyway, he's we're good buds. I just need to let y'all know that. He harasses me every week. So, but anyway, the human being has both. We have the spiritual instinct, which is toward Kashamayim, toward heaven, towards God. We also have the animal instinct that we also get hungry and thirsty, need sleep, have sexual desires and cravings, and all of these appetites that we have. So we are a combination of the two. We are humanity. The human is the bridge between heaven and earth. So that was the purpose of Adam. Adam Rishon, the first Adam, was the bridge between heaven and earth. Okay? He was the go-between between heaven and the animals here on earth. That's why what is his responsibility? To take care of the animals. When he fell, he became an imperfect mediator. Therefore, Hashem sent a second mediator, a second Adam, who would not fall, who would become the full mediator. For God so loved the world, ki achava Elohim ha'olam. Olam, translated here world, is also the word universe. So in saying that, what he is saying, for God so loved the world, what he's saying is, for God so loved creation, all of creation. He loves the whole universe. When Yeshua came to die, that for God so loved the universe that he gave his only begotten Son. Now, we put humanity in the middle of that, which is correct and true, but it's not complete. Because he did not come just for the salvation of humanity. He came to remove the curse from the entire universe, because the entire universe fell under the curse when Adam fell. So the purpose is to redeem all of creation. You see, this is why Yeshua tells us that when a tiny sparrow, when a single sparrow falls, Father sees it. He knows. Because he came, and so Rav Shaul in the book of Romans tells us then that all of creation is groaning with anticipation for their redemption. All of creation groans with anticipation for creation to be redeemed, and man is the key to the redemption, to the salvation of all of creation. Man is the key. So God must, because man fell, man's fall brought the curse upon the universe. So man's lifting up removes the curse. Now he goes on to say in Romans chapter 11 that by Israel's fall, if by Israel's fall we have room to sprout, how much more so by Israel being lifted up? You see, that's the Adam effect. And so God has his reasons for everything that he does, and it's the purpose and the intent. So in Deuteronomy chapter 12, He says, these are the statutes and ordinances that you are to make sure to do in the land that Adonai, the God of your fathers, has given you to possess all the days that you live on the earth. Now listen very carefully. You must utterly destroy all the places where the nations that you will dispossess served their gods. Let me say that again. You must utterly destroy all the places where the nations that you dispossess served their gods. The high mountains, on the hills, under every green tree. You are to tear down their altars, smash their pillars, burn their Asherah poles in the fire, and cut down the carved images of their gods, and you are to obliterate their name from that place. The Asherah pole, that's like the maypole. If you've heard of the maypole dancing, basically that's a sexual dance. It is a pagan dance. The Asherah, the wooden poles were phallic symbols. Such creations as such things as the Washington Monument. Those types of images. Those are phallic symbols. If you study where that imagery comes from, and there's one that is in the middle of the Vatican. When you walk into the Vatican, there's an Asherah. There's a it looks like the Washington Monument that stands in the middle of the Vatican. It's an obelisk, yes, and it is why? Well, because the Vatican is the capital, Rome, and those were pagan temples. That's what they were. Those were all pagan temples. And there was I was teaching last night that one of the things that Antiochus IV did was when he came down and took Jerusalem for the Greeks to Hellenize Jerusalem, he set up a statue of himself in the temple compound. Then he turned the temple itself into a house of prostitution. Because sexuality and immorality, that kind of immorality, and paganism, idolatry, go hand in hand. Because idolatry is adultery, and adultery is idolatry. That God considers them to be the same. So when we commit idolatry against God, we are committing adultery, because we are in a covenant with him. And so he says, you are to tear down their altars, smash their pillars, burn their Asherah poles in the fire, cut down the carved images of their gods, and you are to obliterate their name from that place. Okay, so very interesting. Gregory, Pope Gregory, for whom the Gregorian calendar is named, Pope Gregory, said this. He sent out his envoys and told the bishops and the priests, do not destroy the temples. Incorporate them. Do not destroy the gods. Incorporate them. So the temples for the pagan gods were turned into churches. And the pagan idols, the pagan deities, were turned into saints. And this is where the worship and the prayer to saints in Catholicism comes from. In fact, probably about 30 years ago or so, I was listening to PBS. There was a young professor, a doctor from Pan American at that time, Pan American University, and she had done her doctorate dissertation on Virgen de Guadalupe, the Virgin of Guadalupe. And she was amazed because she had been raised Catholic. She was amazed to find out that La Virgen de Guadalupe was an Aztec goddess that the Catholics had turned into the Virgin Mary in order to attract the Indians into Catholicism, into Christianity. And this is the norm. This is the way that Catholicism has operated. Those churches coming out of Catholicism, those who protested coming out of Catholicism, some of them dealt with the problem, some of them did not. Some of them got rid of all of that, some of them maintained. But that's where all of that comes from. It is simply paganism stamped with the face of Christianity. By the way, it's not too difficult. You can YouTube all of this stuff. You can Google it and look it up and find it. And there's just tons of information about it. There's a university here in San Antonio, a Catholic university. And what is its name? Lady of the Lake. Who's the Lady of the Lake? Well, if you know British history, it's a goddess who lived in the lake. They turned it into the Virgin Mary. Thus, the Lady of the Lake is now the Virgin Mary. And so that's how they did things. This is completely in opposition to what God said to do and how he said to handle things. So for a Jew, we cannot just put up a synagogue anywhere. Why? Purpose and intent. What was the original purpose? If the original purpose was for the defamation, the opposition of God or his character, that place cannot be used. For example, D.L. Moody, very famous evangelist from the 1800s, Moody Bible Institute, hundreds and hundreds of missionaries and preachers came through his ministry, even today. D.L. Moody, as a young man, he was picking up orphans and urchins and such off of the streets of Chicago. And he was wanting to teach them how to read and write so he could teach them the Bible. And he was having a difficult time finding a place, and the churches didn't want to help him too much because he was dealing with little runny-nosed, barefooted, raggedy kids. And they didn't want to mess with it. So he went and he rented a beer hall and started Sunday school in the beer hall. That beer hall turned into the Moody Memorial Church of Chicago, Illinois, one of the largest churches for many years of Chicago. But in Judaism, I can't do that. You say, but it's for a good cause, and it's to help the children and all of these things. But what was the original intent of that building? What was the original purpose of that building? So going down the interstate, going up the valley, there's some girly places. And there were a couple of them for sale. Big buildings that could hold us. Oh, that looks like a good place, but it's got that cougar sign outside or whatever, and we could never hold a church service there. Why? Because its original intent was in opposition to God and to his law. Therefore, that is such a building that would necessitate being destroyed under what Torah says here. You can't hang on to it. On the other side of town, there's a nice building, perfect for us. Has 2 chapels, covered parkway. That's where they would put the hearse. And I had thought that would be a good place for a synagogue. And then I told Wilma we were talking about it, and I said, no, we can't do that. Why? Death is there. Did you know in Judaism they never bring the body in the synagogue? The body's buried at the cemetery. Then they come back to the synagogue. Yes. Correct. Makes us unclean. The body is unclean. A dead body is unclean. And this is supposed to be a place of holiness. There is no life in that body. That person is not there. And so basically, in Orthodox Judaism, the body's buried within 24 hours anyway. And there's all kinds of things that happen there that are not common in, for example, it used to be common, but are no longer so. For example, the body is put into a plain wooden box. And not dressed up in a suit, but actually dressed up in pajamas. Why? Because that person has gone to sleep. And so they wear what is called a kittel. A kittel. For our Ashkenazi friends, kittel. A kittel, which is like a pajama. Okay, it's your burial clothes. But anyway, so the person is put in a plain wooden box and buried within 24 hours, put into the ground, not with the, they have the concrete bunkers that they put in, to keep your body safe or whatever. Well, that defeats the purpose. Dust to dust and ashes to ashes. If you are, and the reason why they bury you in 24 hours is because you are not, what's it called? They don't, huh? Well, they don't put they don't embalm you. Why? Because you keep your blood with you. Why? Because the life is in the blood. In a funeral home, they suck the blood, they suck all the juices out of you, throw it down the gutter. That's where your life was. That's where your instincts were. That's why we don't eat blood. Your life is in the blood, the Brit Dam. And so you are buried intact. In Israel, they have teams and squads. When they have these terrorist bombings and things like that, they will have teams that go through and literally will go down with magnifying glasses and pick up with tweezers, pick up every piece of skin and particle, human particle that they can find, so that the body will be buried together intact as much as possible, including the bomber. They have such respect for human life that even the bomber gets his body back as much as they possibly can. They retrieve every bit of it as much as they possibly can, collect it all together, give it back to the family. Now you tell me what other nation would do that. And so dead bodies were in that. Its original intent was to hold dead bodies. Therefore, that is not convenient for the worship of God. That is not a proper place, an appropriate place. Why? Because God cares where you worship him. And I told Wilma, I said, it stands to reason. The person comes into our synagogue and they say, the last time I was here, we were burying Aunt Sally. In fact, she was right there. God forbid that, all people think of our synagogue. Well, that's where the strip club used to be. It is important. It's a mindset. You see, our Western mindset, well, who cares? Just bring it in and it's for a good cause and all of these things. God's not that way. Your intent, the original intent, is important. So at Pesach, Passover, there's a secondary festival called Bikurim. Everybody say Bikurim. We call it first fruits. It's the first of the barley harvest. The Bikurim, the first fruits, is that when the barley becomes aviv, when the barley is beginning to ripen, the farmer will go out to his field and he will look for the best area of grain in his field. And he will take that area and he will mark it off. They literally rope it off. And that is called Bikurim. That is his offering to God. And that grain in that particular area can be used for nothing else. Only Bikurim. That is the grain that goes to the temple. Now, he cannot wait to the last minute and then say, oh yeah, I forgot my Bikurim, and then just go out there, willy-nilly. Because his original intent was to sell that grain. Saying he must have gone out there with intent, with purpose, mark off this part and say, this is God's part. That's my intent. That's my purpose. God goes on to tell the people here that they're not only are they to destroy, they're not to incorporate. You can't take a pagan temple and turn it into a synagogue. You can't take a pagan idol, a pagan statue, and turn it into a saint or an angel or what have you. You can't do that. It's not permitted. You must destroy them. And the reason for the destruction is twofold. Number one, so that you will not look at them and admire them. Number two, so that you will not be tempted to do that. Well, I hate to throw it out. Second gifting, right? Regifting something. I hate to throw it out. And it looks so nice and it looks so pretty. Some people have that picture of the sun on the walls of their homes, not understanding that that's a Mayan god. And you have it on your house. It's so nice and it goes with the decor. God considers it what its original intent was. This is why when we go to HEB or whatever, when you're checking the meat, looking for, not just looking for hechsher, but looking for halal. Because if something is halal, then it is not kosher. Halal is the Islamic hechsher. And if it has an Islamic marking on it, or if it says halal on there, that means that has been offered to the Islamic God. Therefore, it is unfit for you to eat, even if it's from a clean animal. Why? Because the purpose and the intent at its slaughtering was for it to be offered as a sacrifice to that God. And they prayed the prayers. Just like we pray prayers when we're koshering an animal, they're praying prayers for their halal. For you and me, that is not permitted. Why? Purpose, intent. So verse 4, he says, you are not to act like this toward Adonai your God. Notice very carefully. You may not act in this way, saying you may not take the ceremonies of idolatry and paganism and whitewash them, clean them up, and make them Christian or Jewish. Because God does not accept that kind of worship. And that is what a lot of Christianity has done. This is why conversion is necessary, because we have all been there. To convert means to change. We're changing our direction. We're changing our way. Why? Because Torah says, you do it this way. So he says, you are not to act like this toward Adonai your God. Rather, you are to seek only the place Adonai your God chooses from all your tribes to put his name to dwell. There you will come. There you are to bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes, the offerings of your hand, your vow, your free will offerings, and the firstborn from your herd of your flock. There you and your households will eat before Adonai your God and rejoice in every undertaking of your hand, as Adonai your God has blessed you. You will not do all the things as we are. Now listen, you will not do all the things as we are doing here today. Listen, everyone doing what is right in his own eyes. It is not up to you how you approach God. It's up to God how you approach God. And he has a specific way. He has specificities for you. You will not approach me in that manner. You will approach me in this manner. Why? Because that's the way the pagans do it, and you will not approach me as though I'm just another pagan god. As though I am special, I am Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. He is the only, and there is no other. So you will not approach him the way you are approaching non-entities. Basically, that's what you're doing. And so you will not do all the things as we are doing here today. Now, you hear people say, very common expression these days, well, God knows my heart. Well, God knows my heart. God forbid you ever say that. Because the truth is, he does know your heart. What does he know? The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. The heart of man is rebellious. And we don't like being told what to do. So God says to Adam, don't eat of that tree. Of all the trees, hundreds, thousands, species, you can eat of all of them. You don't have to worry about nightshade. You don't have to worry about poison cherries. You don't have to worry about everything is good. Everything is good. Just not this one. So Chava says, well, I'm going to eat of that one. He must be trying to keep something back from us. He must think that we're not so smart. We don't have this thing figured out. So I'm going to eat of that one. Why? Don't blame Chava. That's what you do. God says, don't do this, and we want to do it. God says, do this, and we don't want to do it. Rav Shaul calls it in the book of Romans a mystery. The things that I would not do, those I find I do. The things that I would do, those I find I do not do. Oh, miserable, wretched man that I am. We're the same way. Mom would say, now those cookies up on the freezer, the cookies in the cookie jar, do not eat them. Therefore, your lunch is tomorrow. Okay, Mom. In the morning, okay, so who ate the cookies out of the cookie jar? Nobody has cookies for their lunch. Why? Because she told us where they were and not to do it. And the nefesh bechama, the animal instinct, said, I'm going to get me some. Why? Because sin tastes sweeter for the moment. That scripture, by the way, Shlomo said that. Sin tastes sweeter for the moment. That is our animal instinct. Saying that the heart is rebellious. That's our problem. That's what got us here to begin with. That's what got us into trouble, is that the heart is rebellious. And when God tells us not to do something, the flesh says, let's do it. You will not do all the things as we are doing here today, everyone doing what is right in his own eyes. There's a distinction in Christianity and Judaism. There's many distinctions, but there's one very glaring one, and that is this. You go into any various Christian church, various denomination, and the service will not be the same. Catholics have it one way. Methodists have something else. The Baptists have something else. The Presbyterians have something else. The Pentecostals have something else. Assemblies of God have something else. The Free Wills have something else. The non-denominational, they have, everybody's got their own thing going. Does that not sound contrarian to exactly what God said here? You don't do it your own way. You don't just go do and say, well, I'm going to do it this way or I'm going to do it that way. That's why we work hard, and we're working hard on the liturgy to improve it, to make it better, to get it more original, to take it back. When we discover we're doing something wrong, we change it. When we discover we're saying something wrong, we change it. In Judaism, it does not matter if you go to an ultra-Orthodox synagogue or you go to a Reformed synagogue, from the ultra-conservative to the ultra-liberal. The liturgy will be the same. The service is the same. You can go into any synagogue and you will know where you are in the service. Why? Because God set down the rules. This is the way you approach me. It's not about everyone doing. This is why every synagogue you go into, from ultra-Orthodox to Reform, every single synagogue is facing Jerusalem. Churches, most of them are facing away from Jerusalem. Intentional? Probably not, I wouldn't say. But it tells you something. You see, we have to be careful in our approach. This is one of the things that the anti-Mashiach is going to use, is how we approach God. It is an anti-Mashiach spirit that says, I can approach God anyway, anyhow. God knows my heart. It's okay. When God has specifically said, nope, it's not okay. He says, you have not yet come to the resting place and the inheritance that Adonai your God is giving you. But when you cross over the Jordan and settle in the land that Adonai your God enables you to inherit and gives you rest from all the enemies around you, you will dwell in safely. Then the place Adonai your God chooses to make his name dwell, there you are to bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes, the offering of your hand, all the finest vow. When you bring an offering to him, by the way, you can't just go out there and say, okay, well, I was going to sell that one, but I'll make that one the offering to God. That's why he requires firstborn. The first male that breaks the mother's womb is the one that's offered to God. Because you give to God first. That's why it's called Bikurim. That's why it's called first fruits. You give to God first, not last. You give to him best, not least, not worst. Then you will rejoice before Adonai your God, you and your sons and daughters, your slaves and maids, and so on. We don't have time to read it all. You can read the rest of this chapter 12. How everything is to be done in that place. He tells them, you may not sacrifice anywhere you want. Don't just go willy-nilly. It used to be, you could sacrifice. Abraham sacrificed there. Isaac sacrificed there. Jacob sacrificed there. Noah sacrificed there. Adon sacrificed here. Abel sacrificed there. Cain sacrificed. And so everybody was just sacrificing wherever they want. God said, no more of that. You may only sacrifice here. Where's here? Jerusalem. Where? Sion. Where? Beit HaMikdash. You may only sacrifice in Israel. In Israel, you may only sacrifice in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, you may only sacrifice on the Temple Mount. In the Temple Mount, you may only sacrifice on the altar. There's only one place where you can sacrifice. So the question is, well, there's no temple. There's no altar. Exactly. So there's no sacrifice. The sacrifices that were meant for the temple don't exist. But when the new temple is built, the new altar will be there, the sacrifices will resume. And it is called a house of prayer for whom? All nations, not just Israel, for the world. All the world will bring sacrifices to the Beit HaMikdash. In closing, down at the bottom, verse 29, he says, when Adonai your God cuts off before you the nations that you are going in to dispossess, when you have dispossessed them and settled in their land, be careful not to be trapped by imitating them. Listen very carefully. Do not get trapped imitating them. Do not inquire about their gods. Saying, how did these nations serve their gods? I will do the same. You are not to act like this toward Adonai your God. For every abomination of Adonai which he hates, they have done to their gods. They even burn their sons and daughters in the fire. This is why we don't celebrate Christmas. What was its original intent? Google it. It was a pagan holiday in which great wickedness took place, started with the Babylonians, went into the Greeks and the Romans. There's a reason why they eat ham on Christmas. There's a reason for the Yule log. There's a reason for the tree. There's a reason for the old man. There's even a reason why he's wearing a pointed hat. Google it. There's a reason why he's wearing red. It all has a purpose. It's not innocent. And yet we have incorporated this into our lifestyles. If we are going to convert, that means letting go of these things. And this is one of the reasons why people coming from the Christian lifestyle have a difficult time. This is one of the hardest times of the year, both for Christians who have a Messianic in the family and the Messianic. Now, in no way, in no wise are you to be mean, cruel, ugly, debatable, arguable, argumentative. No. You're to have a kind heart and a kind spirit because you were once there and you know what that is. And you know they say that the convert is the most zealous of all the people. Of all the Jews, the convert is the most zealous. Why? Because he chose to be this. The others were born into it. He chose it. Therefore, he defends it with zealotry. Did you know Eliyahu is believed to have been a ger tzaddik, that he was a convert? He was not born a Jew. Elijah, the prophet, was not born a Jew. That's why he's called Tishbi. He's called the Tishbite. Because that is outside of Israel. That's one of the countries of the Goyim. He became a convert. Do you know that some of the greatest defenders of the Jewish faith were actually converts? Some of the greatest, commentators and such as that, Akiva. They're converts. They're converts. So put your sword away. Avoid the situation as much as possible. Avoid the debate as much as possible. You say, but they're practicing paganism and I want them to stop. Well, you're not going to stop them. I'm sorry, but in this country, you don't have the right to pull your dagger out and kill every pagan. Your name is not Gideon. And God has not called you to do such a thing. In fact, we find that the times that God does call people to do such things is actually rare in the Bible. And there are actually hundreds of years that pass, generations and generations that pass before God becomes fed up enough to say, you know what, put a stop to that. Because what he says here, he hates what they have done with their gods, that they even burn their sons and their daughters in the fire to their gods. Molech. Human sacrifices. Do you know that human sacrifices, Western Europe, in all of Europe, in Greece, in Rome, was a thing? And that was considered to be the most powerful sacrifice you could offer, was a human sacrifice. That's why, you know, the bog man that they found, the man tied up in the bog with the rope, the cord around his neck, because he was a human sacrifice. They found a young lady in a bog, in a peat bog, over there in Great Britain, with her hands tied behind her back, her legs trustled, her throat slit. Human sacrifice. You know the story of the Aztecs and the Mayans and all such around here. In case anybody thinks I'm talking out of turn here, my daughter-in-law is of Mayan descent. Her father was a Mayan Indian. Charity. You cannot sanitize such things. That's what the enemy does. He tells you, well, you can clean it up and sanitize it and make it all nice and clean. And, you know, all of this debate, it's all actually emotional. Because for many people, Christmas is such a sweet and memorable day because of the family and all of that. It's so beautiful, it's so wonderful, and everything like that. Okay, but what was its original intent? It wasn't so pretty back then. And you're still holding on to customs that they practiced back then. Oh, but I'm making it towards my God. Well, my God says not to do that to him. The God who wrote Torah, who is the creator, the one and only God, the true God, he said, you don't do those things with me. What is unclean, if its purpose was unclean to begin with, it cannot be clean. It does not matter how you slice it, dice it, soak it. You can pour acid over it. You can do whatever you want. The pig is still unclean. A pig, you can put lipstick on it. It's still just a pig. And I'm not talking about any politicians here, all right? The pig is still a pig. You cannot kosher a pig. You cannot kosher a temple to a pagan god. You cannot kosher a pagan holiday. You cannot kosher that which is common and ordinary. It must be in its intent set out to be kosher. It must, in its intent and purpose and its original intent and purpose, be set apart for that specific reason. This is why circumcision for health reasons is not considered sufficient for conversion to Judaism. It's your intent. Why was it done originally? Then what can I do? Well, you can't sew it back on. It's too late. It's done. But you can draw blood from the same area. And in doing that, with the intent and the purpose of becoming a Torah-observant, Yeshua-centered Jew. So your intent and your purpose. Cito, would you close, please?
draw close to you, Father, know that you will draw close to us. Love you. We praise you in the name of Yeshua Messiah.
By the way, let me explain real quick something just to give you another good example. This is why when we're doing a mikvah, when we're doing the tevilah, the immersion, it's not a picnic. And you don't have the intent of doing a picnic. You have the intent of doing a tevilah. Picnic, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with swimming, having a good time and everything. But if you're doing a tevilah, then it's a tevilah. If you're doing a picnic, it's a picnic. And so we keep the distinction between things. Okay? So that's, you have a circumcision. Is it for health purposes or is it for Jewish conversion? In these types of instances, it's not both. You can't say, well, yes, it's for health reasons and Jewish conversion. No, it's for one or the other. It's for one or the other. Okay, so everything has its separation, its distinction, its dedication. For example, at Hanukkah, what is the blessing of Hanukkah? Lighting the Hanukkah lights, that these lights are to be kindled and then used for no other purpose than to watch them burn. And you cannot use them. You cannot use the Hanukkah lights. You're not supposed to use them to kindle anything else. In other words, you want to start the fire in your fireplace or whatever. No. These have their distinct purposes. So these candles, these are our Shabbat candles. What candles can I use for Shabbat? Any candle you want. Just understanding that if it's a Shabbat candle, it's a Shabbat candle. It's not for lighting your house. It's for separating between Shabbat and the rest of the week. The Havdalah candle is the Havdalah candle. That's all it's used for. The Elijah cup is the Elijah cup. That's not for everyday drinking, whatever. That's for its specific purpose. If you have a challah tray, the challah tray is the challah tray. It's not for any bread, whatever. It's for the challah. Okay? Why? Because it's to focus our mind on intent and purpose. Why am I using that? So this building here is a synagogue. Then as long as we're here using it as a synagogue, we're not to be using it for any other things, which is, by the way, why we're needing a new place, because we need to make the distinction between fellowship hall and synagogue. Because the synagogue, the house of prayer, is not the fellowship hall. The fellowship hall is not the house of prayer. They're distinct. And so we need to be careful with those kinds of things, making those kinds of distinction. The podium is the podium for the Torah scroll. Nothing else. Nothing else goes there. Only the Torah. This table is the teaching table. This chair is called the chair of Moshe, the seat of Moshe. That's its only purpose is for the teacher to sit here. This table's only purpose is to be here. And we need to be careful about those kinds of things. This teaches us to have proper respect, not only for God, but the things that represent His kingdom to us. The Torah scroll is the Torah scroll. Therefore, it's treated with respect. Your Bible is your Bible. Therefore, it's treated with respect. The Siddur is the Siddur. Did you hear about the man on the airplane? On the jet last year? He's suing, I think it's American Airlines, one of those big airlines. Anyway, he's suing them because he had put his Siddur it was in a proper bag, whatever, plastic bag, but he had put it up in the bin on top. The stewardess came in, saw it there, threw it down on the floor, told him that he needed to set it down on the floor, told him he needed to put it under his seat. Now, in Orthodox Judaism, the Siddur contains the name of God. It does not go on the floor. So he became upset. They kicked him off the plane. So now he's suing. We need to have that kind of gallantry, that kind of zealotry for the things of God. Because if we have that kind of gallantry and zealotry for the things of God, all the more for God himself. But when we show disrespect for the things of God, we are in effect showing disrespect for God himself. And we need to be careful about such things. Shabbat shalom.